whole time.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, you got your warning. Laura, I should have used the time to have your other members, but I was an idiot. Well, I was. Okay, so it says this is being live streamed, so it's waiting for you to say got it.
Who has the keyboard and mouse for this? Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, get out of the way, so I'm walking the. Got it. Okay. That owl is looking at one. All right. BJ, are we good?
Should be good to go. See it up on YouTube.
Yay, we'll see it up on YouTube. Nene, you got it? We're good? Okay. 2 more seconds. This just is motivation to, come to consensus. I have hope. I do too. I have hope. Are we good? Here we go. Okay. All right, BJ, it's got you. Oh, you just broke the camera. No. Sorry. Okay. Yay. Hi, Matt. I get to come up and walk through the agenda since we've gone through the ground rules, and I'll go back over to my corner and you and Dana do your thing.
All right. My name is Matt McCarley, and for those who are either watching this live or are looking at the recording of it, it took us about 30 minutes or so to get the tech stuff right, but we're now set to go. The committee has not started meeting or deliberating in the time that we were waiting. So where we're going to start tonight is with a quick review of the criteria for the maps, and then we're going to start going through the maps. So I sent you a memo with the criteria written out, but we've also posted it on the wall. So just very briefly, the first criteria that all of the plans have to meet is that they have to be nearly equal in population. And the test for that is that the largest district can be no more than 5% above the ideal district size. The smallest can be no more than 5% below the ideal district size. The second requirement is that all parts of a district must be contiguous to some other part of that district. You can't have an island out of the district unless it's a satellite annexation. But other than that, they have to be contiguous. All pieces must be contiguous with some other part of that same district. The third criteria is compactness. To the extent possible, we would like the district to have a reasonably compact shape. It can be square, it can be round, it can be a pie shape, but it ought to have some reasonable shape and not be a snake that goes across the city in an irregular fashion. The fourth criteria is communities of interest and precincts. We've decided that precincts are going to remain our basic building block for the districts. It's easier for citizens to remember that, for candidates to remember that, and for the Board of Elections to administer that. So we're going, unless it's absolutely impossible to draw a lawful district plan without splitting precincts, we will not split precincts. Communities of interest is really a subjective description of something in common that an area has with the rest of the part of that district. Common examples would be either race, ethnicity, income, specific issues. For example, people that live on the side of the city where the airport is may have a common interest of how that airport is managed and how the noise cone is administered. So various things can be a community of interest, but what you're trying to do is keep people together who have some set of common interests. we may make an allowance for growth. So in those districts that we expect to have future growth, we would want to try to be a little bit under the ideal size rather than over the ideal size, so that as that district grows over the next 10 years, it doesn't start out at the top end and continue growing. It starts a little bit lower and grows into the ideal size. In this particular case, as Dana will describe for you if you ask her, the west side of the city, District 5, has more already approved multifamily units than the rest of the city. I believe it's about 50% of the total units already approved in the city are on that west side, which means you can anticipate growth. It's something over, Dana, 2,000 units? She didn't
Over
know.
2,000 units.
2,000?
Yes.
All right, so you figure 2,000 units, and the average size of a household in Greensboro, according to the census, is about 2.27. So multiply 2,000 by 2.27, and you can see that at some point, you can expect growth in that western edge of the city that's significant. And if possible, we'd like to try and start with that, the district that covers the west side of the city, to be a little bit lower than ideal size, so that as it grows into that rather than way past it. The next one is race. We may take race into account. We may not use race as a predominant factor in drawing districts, but we'll talk about the fact that a couple of the districts have historically been minority-majority districts, and we will look at a way, make sure that we're conscious of those numbers as we move precincts around. And so we'll, with each district map, proposed, suggested map, we'll talk about those numbers. And then the last one is public acceptance. And that's just a generic way to say, when we get to the final map, I want you all to step back from it and say, when the public in Greensboro reviews this map, will they view it as fair and reasonable? It's just that last filter to make sure that we've not done something, though we might have followed all the other criteria, we might have done something that just doesn't look right. So that's the criteria. Any questions, especially from you, Ms. Blackstock, since you missed the first conversation about it?
No.
Yep, you good?
Yes.
All right. Then what we're going to do next is go through some maps that the staff and Ladidra and I have put together for you to look at using these criteria. And with each one, I'll describe to you what we did, and then describe to you what I think the various pieces of that are. Let's start with LC2. And by the way, LC stands for least change. 2 and 2, the number you see with each of these names, the naming convention is that the number tells you how many precincts were moved to create that map proposal suggested. So B6 means that it's draft map D, it moves 6 precincts. C5 is draft map C, it moves 5 precincts. So we'll go through that. All right, so let's start with least change 2. This literally moves only 2 precincts. It moves G51 out of 1 into District 4 and G02 out of District 2 into District 3. What does it do? Well, it's reasonably compact, although I will tell you that G02, if you look pretty much in the middle of the map, you'll see the cross-hatched precinct that is now purple, that used to be pink. It sort of sticks out like a sore thumb, but if you're in a least change proposal, the idea is how can we move the fewest possible precincts and get to the required constitutional number of less than 5%, more than 5% in the variance. This plan does that. In fact, every plan we're going to show you except the 2001 map does that. They all do that. So this one does that. But
Would you repeat that for me, please? Comparing this to the 2001 map.
The 2001 map, Ms. Sanford asked last time, could we see the last pie-shaped wedge map that the city had, correct?
Not exactly, but that works.
Okay.
Yes.
So we looked back, got this, and apparently this is a map that relatively closely resembles what was in place between 2001 and 2008, I believe. So we looked at that, and we'll talk about what that map does and whether there are ways to move some things and get it within the tolerances. Right now, it is not within tolerance, but there's some moves we could make that would preserve the notion of pie wedges all coming into the center of the city and get within the constitutional provision of no more than 5% above or 5% below the ideal district size. So we'll get to that one last, but all four of the other maps are within the constitutional tolerances. Now, also about LC2, I mentioned to you that on the compactness test, you've got that piece jutting out from the district into district. We changed the colors, and now I have to remember.
It's 3, I believe.
Okay, it goes from 3 into, two to 3. Okay, so it goes from 2 to 3. It sticks out a bit, but it's still relatively compact. It's not so different from compact that it would be a problem if that was something we wanted to do. It does shrink District 1, which has very high population. It does not shrink District 2 sufficiently. 4 is the largest, which is part of what we were trying to do. 4 is the landlocked district and probably won't grow as much as the others, so it'd be appropriate for it to start a little higher. And it makes District 5 the smallest, which is where we expect that multifamily development to show population growth. So relatively passes the test on compactness. It doesn't do much to districts 1 and 2, so it doesn't upset the majority minority districts. And it seems to have roughly a community of interest for the two precincts that got moved. Any question about that plan?
Just making sure I see faces. It's hard to tell faces with masks. Is everybody following along? Because that's a lot of moving and map reading. And everybody there?
I have, can we ask just clarifying questions as we go on?
Yes, and ask them loudly. My
Okay.
hearing is not really good.
Thanks. Good reminder. Did you move these districts for any other reason other than population?
No.
You didn't take into account race or any of that stuff?
All we were doing was trying to see what's the fewest number of precincts you can move and get within the tolerances,
Right.
within the variances.
And GO2 includes Revolution? No, is that accurate?
I can't tell on that. GO2.
I think so, because it's right there. at
Proximity
Maple-
United Methodist
Yeah.
Church.
Right there at the Maple Street Police Station,
Okay.
all of that
Right.
vicinity.
I have this question,
Yes,
if I might. You have G26, which would be in the District 2. What would be the significance if you move G26 rather than GO2? And just as to the map configuration, because that would keep it compact. I mean, I don't know if it would accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
I think the issue is the population in 26. Dana, can you give me the population? It's up here at the top of the map. And
For G26?
yeah,
G26 is 4,719,
and what was the population in GO2?
2,530.
That's why we moved the one we moved.
What's the
The least
population of
population.
61, G61?
We were just trying to, depending on how you move things, we played with enough different numbers, Mr. Bowden, that if we had moved the bigger one, we might have had to move other things to get it to balance.
Okay, let me just,
Back to that basic premise.
let me digest that for a second.
All right, back to the basic premise. Precincts are not uniform in either geographic size or population. So you can't do a one-for-one trade in various places. You have to check quickly to see what's the population and what are we trying to stay under or over.
I got it.
Mr. Black.
So based on what you projected here, the target being 59,807, all those come within the target. Okay. The total population is what it would be with change.
Yes.
And everything on the 5% deviation would be an acceptable range, would be an acceptable number.
As
Am I
long
getting-
as it is,
Everything is within the 5% up and down.
it is on this plan, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm gonna jump in because I started this, because we have like how many scenarios, do we have maps to go through? So I'm gonna suggest that we go through the different maps and let them talk through, and then, because we start swapping precincts here, we have no idea where, I think we'll drive Dana nuts, but we'll, let's go through the scenarios to see the logic, and then one can start, what about this, with the what ifs, okay? Does that sound good?
Sounds good, Steve. Two quick things, just for looking at population. The big maps that we have has the population.
Okay, got
And then the other thing, when we look at compactness, to her point, the LC3 is a move with the G26, and I think that's the next one that Mac's gonna probably talk about.
Yes. All right, one other comment. Not sure that you'll end up moving forward LC2 or LC3. But the point of those maps is to show you that it is possible to move a very small number of precincts and be within the constitutional tolerances, but not necessarily meet all of the other criteria that you've established. So we'll talk through that with LC3. All right, this time, least change only moves 3 precincts, moves 26 from District 2 to 3. SUM, I assume that means Summit 1 from 1 to 5, and G17 from 3 to 4. Now remember that what we're trying to do is move population from the eastern edge of town in Districts 1 and 2, which are, as you see by those numbers, 61,000, 62,000. We're trying to move population from 1 and 2 into 3 and 4, and not necessarily too much into 5 to accommodate future growth. But the goal is we've got to get some population out of 1 and 2, especially 2, which is over the constitutional tolerance as we sit here today. So in that one, we move 3 precincts. It does shrink District 2, but it doesn't do much to shrink District 1. If you'll note the stats on this one, District 1 is at 60,000. District 2, we got down to 58,000, but at 60,000, it is 381 over the ideal district size, which means there's not as much room to get it down some. And 5 is only down 196 from the ideal. So it doesn't do a whole lot for District 5. 5 could be lower. We believe that the community of interest seems to match up because it's relatively unchanged. And in both of these least change proposals, that's pretty clear. You're dealing with edge precincts that are probably as much like the precinct on the other side as they were on the first side. It's relatively compact, although it's relatively compact, a little bit better. Racing 1 and 2 are preserved as majority minority districts. Questions about LC3? Let's move to B6. This one moves 6 precincts. And the goal here, now we weren't trying to just move the least number of precincts, we were trying to achieve the various criteria that the committee selected. So the next two maps are legitimate shots at trying to get all of the criteria in, to the extent we could. Let me tell you now that the one we had the hardest time fixing was leaving District 5 low enough to accept a whole lot of additional growth. And part of that is because the size of the precincts, both for geography and for population on that side of the city, they're large. And if you move one in, there's nothing small to move out to kind of get it back in the right size range. So none of these work perfectly for the criteria of getting District 5 really small. B6, all right, so we're gonna move precinct 26 from 2 to 3. We move Summit 1 from 1 to 5, G56 from 1 to 4, G58 from 5 to 4, SF4 from 3 to 5, and G40A2 from 4 to 5. Community of interest still lines up well. Compactness is fairly good, although I've got the G56 and G58 moves aren't perfect. They look like they're sort of a little foot sticking out at the bottom of District 4, but it's still tolerably compact. And the SF4 move actually makes sense. That probably is a better match after the move from 3 to 5. Race is preserved in Districts 1 and 2. Now, growth issue. This one does shrink 1 and 2. You'll notice that the deviation is that District 1 is now 4.3% below ideal, and District 2 is 2.81 below ideal. We were shooting to have District 4, the landlocked district, fairly large, and you'll notice that it is the largest at 4.64 above ideal. The gap is that District 5, which we would like to have been a little bit lower, comes in at 1.57 above. So it didn't quite get there. So 4 out of 5, we did a good job, but didn't make 5 out of 5. Questions about map B6? Map C5. And you'll notice that we're moving some of the same precincts in several different maps. It's because they're the right size and in the right place to move to try and get the numbers right, matching up communities of interest and hoping we can also get the growth issue right. All right, so in this one, we move precinct 26 again from 2 to 3, Summit 1 from 1 to 5, G57 again from 1 to 5, G62 from 5 to 4, and G13 from 3 to 4. Community of interest appears to match up well. We've not moved a neighborhood into a district where it doesn't match relatively well. Race in 1 and 2 are preserved. Those are still majority minority districts. They're relatively compact. I will admit that G62 sticks out a little bit, but not bad. It's at the bottom left corner of the yellow district, District 4. Kind of drops down there. But again, it's within tolerance for compactness. None of these, by the way, split any precincts. You can do that. The allowance for growth is again 4 out of 5. We shrunk 1 and 2. You'll notice that their deviations are 1 is 4.37% below the ideal, 2 is 2.81 below. We ended up with, again, 4 being the largest at 4.46 above ideal. And then again, the one that is hard to get to fit is that District 5 is barely just barely above the ideal target number. It's at 0.19% above ideal. But that's the lowest that we've gotten it in any of the plans that we were able to draw. So again, 4 out of 5 of the districts has created match the criteria we were trying to get. Questions about that map? All right, now let's talk about the 2001 to 2008 map. I understand. And Marlene, since you were the one who suggested this, I'm going to rely on you to correct anything I say that isn't what you intended. Was to go back and find a historical map where most of the districts end in a pie-shaped point near the middle of the city. Correct?
Right.
Okay. And that's what this one does. So let's look at what it does. I will tell you that it does preserve race in districts 1 and 2. It is relatively compact. There's a couple of oddities, but not bad. There are no split precincts, but now let's look at the growth issues. All right, so does it shrink 1? Yes, but it shrank it below 5% variance, so too much. Did not shrink 2. So it's not accomplishing the growth factor at all. District 3 comes in at 16.62% above ideal, which means it's way out of whack and would have to have some trimming done to it. District 4, which we wanted to be one of the larger ones, comes in here at 11.32, but I'll tell you that District 4 on the 2001 map is so differently shaped from District 4 in the present map that it's not a completely fair comparison. And notice it goes all the way out to the western edge of the city, which is what is now in District 5. So it is not nearly a one-to-one comparison with the current District 4. And then the last one is District 5, comes in small at less than 5.51 below ideal size, making it too small, but again, it too doesn't match at all what the current District 5 looks like. Dana has done some work to play with pieces of this to revise it, to see if we can preserve the notion of ending with all of the districts coming close to the center of the city, but meeting the constitutional variances of no more than 5 above or 5% below the ideal size, and trying to get the population growth issues to work out a little bit better. So we're going to call that one 2001 modified. And what you'll see as a major change, and Dana, you're supposed to help me with this if I get this wrong,
Sure.
is that we have moved some material from some precincts from.
So we have moved some precincts from 3, because 3 was so much larger.
Yeah.
So we have moved some to District 4 and some to District 2. We also made a change between District 1 and District 2. And I did want to point out, so this was just done in the past hour, so I'm going to say these numbers are draft. But Matt, I did count up the number of changes in precincts. So with the 2001 plan, there would be 26 precinct modifications. With this 2001 modified, there are 21 precinct modifications.
All right. Questions about either one of those? I think what we say is that the 2001 version unmodified is not an acceptable map, but it was a starting place to get to the 2001 modified that we could get within the tolerances. And if it's one that the committee wants to consider further, we can play with it. All right, the task for the committee at this point.
One question. What did you say was 21 precincts modified?
The 2001 modified map
Yeah,
has 21 modifications.
and was something 26 modifications.
The 2001 is
Would
26.
require 26.
Correct.
But I will tell you that the 2001 unmodified is not an acceptable amount. It is legally not acceptable.
Yeah.
So we go to the 2001 modified. The task for the committee at this point is to take a look at these maps and tell us, are you interested in them? Are there things you want us to try to move, slight tweaks to them? Do you have a totally different idea for a map? So let's start with the tweak conversation. Unless y'all tell me differently, I'm going to guess that the two least change maps are not a reasonable starting point.
So I'm gonna disagree.
Okay, fire away.
And as I look at these, I actually sort of see kind of shaking out a small, medium, large option that we could offer the public. A small being a least change, a medium being a B or C, and then our large change being the pizza pie, for lack of a better. So I actually, in looking at the least change, the least change two, and I do acknowledge that the moving GO2 over into 3 does make it look a little funny. However, when we look at our target deviations, that LC2 map does a great job of leaving growth in D1 and D5.
Yes.
It does a great job with D4 landlocked by putting it at that 3%. And, you know, I look over at the growth maps and looking at D2's potential growth. And, you know, ideally, I think I'd like to see a little bit more overhead for growth in D2, but I think that, you know, in the future, we might be able to move and adjust. Anyway, point being that least change 2, and I would say least change 2 better than LC3 addresses those growth issues. So I don't, so again, on your assertion of, you know, can we just toss out the least change? I would actually like to offer that to the public for comment.
Okay.
Because when we're looking at the public, if we can satisfy the constitutional legal requirements, and in addition to that, again, with LC2, and it does address the growth issue fairly well. I think that's something that we should put to the public and let them say, yeah, all right.
I will agree
LC3,
with
you're
you.
saying?
LC2. Because so LC2 does create that GO2 kind of sticking out funny, and I will acknowledge that it looks less pretty than LC3. However, when you look at,
It doesn't create, that's existing. G26 is the existing little intrusion there. It's still weird, but it doesn't.
oh no, I'm not talking about 26. I'm talking about GO2, and then yeah, that's the one that I'm talking about.
Oh, okay, that one.
Yeah, because LC2 creates that compared to the other District 3, which I think is slightly more pleasing to the eye. However, the LC2 does a better job with providing for future growth. If you look at the numbers at the bottom of LC3 on the deviation, it has far less room for growth.
All right, let's put this in context. Dana, tell me what you think in order the districts are that will grow the most over the next 10 years.
I will share that we have updated this map at the committee request from last week. So the map that's on your table in the reddish color shows the two maps that we had last week show single family and multifamily units and lots. What this does is what you guys asked us last week. It shows population, so it breaks down the apartment units or multifamily units and also the single family lots, and combines it into one map and just shows population. So this map shows that the greatest populations are shown in the precincts in red. There are several in Council District 5. On that western side of town that the map is talking about.
So 5, if you're really looking at trying to make sure that we've got anticipated future growth, 5 is the one to pay the most attention to. What would you put in the next order?
I would say next would be Council District 2, because there are several precincts in the northeastern side of town that we anticipate, and we have approved lots and units to be built with Council District 1 behind that.
And I've got counts on those if anybody wants them. I quickly drew in the current council precinct lines and current District 2 would be looking at growth from about 2,500 to 5,000. District 5 would be looking at growth from between about 5,600 to 10,000. And then the other couple are, around 1,000 to 2,000 or so, 600 to 2,000 in District 3 and District 1. So District 5 is twice the growth of District 2, and District 2 is probably 3 times the growth of the other ones.
So LC2 does the best job of the 2 LC maps of accounting for future growth in 5. And LC3 accounts better for future growth in 2. Neither accounts for greatly accounts for future growth in both.
I'd like to just, I personally like to propose 2001 modified map with more changes, but I think it goes back, putting the core constituency together, compactness and the pie shape scenarios and numbers, I think are an adequate position and projections that would handle that. Is you got District 5, which is at the -0.4, which anticipates some growth. Same thing, the 2 being a 0.83, which is not bad in that number. That's a map personally, if you're talking about put it out for public comment, I personally would hope that we would include that map as part of the consideration.
And I'll respond to that by saying I like Mr. Blackledge's conversation about putting out some options.
Yeah.
What we want is for the public to tell us what they think
Right.
about these various options. And if we put out a least change, a middle change, and a dramatic
Right.
change, we'll hear from the public. They'll tell us what they think. So I think that kind of approach makes a lot of sense at this stage.
Right.
I agree. I think it's the proposal 2001. We're going to end up with some version of that, at least for public discussion. LC2, and I also agree with putting out, 3 options, maybe more depending. I don't think I'm ready tonight to make a decision, but these are the maps that ought to go to public right now.
Great comment. We're not asking you to make much of a decision tonight.
Right.
The decision we'd like to make tonight is which ones to move forward for public comment. But that public comment may say, well, we really like LC2, but we want to move these 2 or 3 precincts.
Well, I'm saying that I would like the committee to have that conversation first before we put it out for public conversation.
So just reminding everybody of the calendar.
Yeah.
So the calendar is, the public comment period is a week from today.
Well, and we have one more meeting before that starts.
No.
This is it.
You've got tonight.
Yeah, this is on that meeting.
Okay, then let me just make it clear that this is the most important thing to American democracy than actually having the vote to cast. And I think we need to do our due diligence, and I think the committee has been appointed to do that due diligence, along with the public, but I'm not ready to rubber stamp any of this yet.
Well,
So
there's two other.
we've gotta, I'm not saying you can't convince me, but we've gotta have time to massage these ourselves as well, even if it's during the comment period.
That doesn't mean you're done with them when they go out, but there's also a hard stop.
I
We
get
have
that,
21 days,
I
that's
get
it.
that,
And
I get
or
that.
there will be no election in.
Yeah, and that was not our fault. That was the composition of the committee that was proposed. So, that's, come on. Yes.
So to that, my understanding was that these were ones we were putting out to the public for comment. That did not lock us into these. We
Correct.
could take
That's
anything that
Right.
the public says into account. And I think we do need to get something out. And I do, I will again say, I like the small, medium, large. And let folks, I mean, I would be comfortable tonight picking a small, a medium, and I think we have one for the large change with the 21. And we can continue to work through things, see what the public says.
Okay.
I hear you.
I'm
Go
gonna.
I also think that we should put out two versions of the medium. So if you're looking at B6 and C5, there's a lot of similarities. And so why not put C2, B6, C5, and then the modified? And then we're kind of covering all of the bases because we do have to make a decision what we're gonna put out today.
Well, we can, but we're gonna get, bear in mind, we're gonna get all these questions from the public, and they're not just gonna ask staff or consultants. They're gonna call us and ask us too. So I'd like to know what my answers are before I get those questions. But I mean, just for instance, I look at LC2 and I realize that Church Street is kind of a natural barrier between neighborhoods. So it might be worth looking at splitting G26, even though that's not our ideal, but splitting that and not having to move GO2 over. So that's the kind of
I'm not hearing that.
work I'd like to do before we go.
I'll make sure I'm clear. You're talking about splitting a precinct?
G26, only because and only along the Church Street boundary.
Yeah.
If you're gonna split a precinct, there really needs to be some natural barrier. Like on one of these maps, we created a precinct that goes over Interstate 40, C5, goes, pulls District 4, one precinct south of this, Interstate 40. Those are gonna be completely different neighborhoods. So that's less than ideal.
Ellen, we haven't heard from you, so I'll make sure I know we have some passionate folks, make sure you are heard.
I like the idea of the choice. I do like the idea of LC2 being a starting point because, you know, one of my questions from last week was, I'd like to find out from the public, do people have a problem with the current maps? So if we have this baseline, this is, you know, basically how it is, this is the least change, we might find that the public is pretty much fine with our city council districts, and they might think C2 is fine. And as you're saying, they might go, now, wait a minute, this pie shape, you're really changing things, and, you know, I think at least having LC2 in there is a good base point, just to see how people respond to that. As far as do we offer two choices, you know, like LC2 and then an LC2 and then a pie shape, you know, those are two very big changes, but you might find people love that idea, really shaping it. Do y'all think the idea of the small, medium, and large? But like you say, if we do small, medium, large, we got to decide which medium we're going with. So that would be the issue. But I do like, I want to reinforce, I do like the choice idea, and so I do like the idea of keeping the loose change, because people might just, we might luck up, or you know, people think it's fine. But if they have a problem with something, having those choices that will show, oh, I'm liking this for this reason. And I just want to feel if anybody's got a problem with something, I want these maps to show this is your time to share your problem. You know, because me sitting in my District 3, you know, I haven't thought about it. And so if anybody's got a problem, I like there to be some wiggle room for them to say why they like more of a change.
Mac, I'm gonna clarify just to make sure we're all on the same page about what our options are. So the options are, you know, if we do the small, medium, and large, which thank you for giving us a starting point, because that seems to have been helpful. But that doesn't mean you're locked into those. This is what the public says, you know, I like this least change thing, but I'm a little nervous about these two things. You get that feedback. Or you'll get, hey, that reminds me of what way it used to be. I don't know why it changed so much. That doesn't mean you're locked into the exact boundaries, but there's still some things to reach the criterion. Oops, there it is over that shoulder. And is that,
And frankly, as part of public comments, someone could have a brilliant idea, no offense to you, Matt, but could have a brilliant idea that addresses everything that we hear from them.
Yes.
And it's something totally different that we can then adopt and use, right? I mean, just because we put 3 out, I mean, that doesn't lock us into those.
correct?
And
It's
just to
sure
be
enough,
clear,
but nobody's gonna have a brilliant idea about LC2. You know, maybe there's other ideas that are not so brilliant, like
So-
mine, to take a look at splitting G26,
So LC2,
yeah.
take that Church Street 26, add a little bit more to 3, and that does a better job of reducing population size in D2, which is one of the roads. So that's a minor modification to LC2
That
that
moves
creates,
GO2 back into District 3.
no, keep GO2, better address the population. But
Until we
that
know
then
which
creates another.
population there is on either side of Church Street, we won't really know.
Yeah, so, but there could,
But
I
we
mean, there
can
could be
propose that
ideas.
Yeah, we could propose that
Alright.
precinct split and get the feedback from the community on that.
They may not want to be split.
Maybe not,
Yeah.
that's right, that may matter.
So,
I know GO2 is predominantly elderly white. And we know that.
Are they gonna wanna be in District 3?
No, I can tell you that right now.
Thank you.
I am the chief judge at GO2.
okay.
I know what comes to GO2. A few minorities, you know, but it's predominantly the elderly white. They're not gonna go for that.
Well, but if you put it out for comment, that's what you may hear.
Oh, yeah, you
But then
will.
you may hear that they love it, but we won't know
They won't,
until we
because
get the comment.
most of them can barely walk and they don't live far, so they don't have far to drive. I mean,
well, that's a good point. Just because we move the precinct from one district to another, doesn't mean we physically move the precinct. It just means they vote for the representative in a different district. Great point, thank you.
They vote in the same polling
They
place.
vote in the same place.
Yeah.
They're just voting for a different slate of officers.
that have to be made known to them because
Yeah,
if they don't understand that, that's when
yeah, let's be very careful about language then.
Yeah.
Well, when I'm saying move a precinct, I mean move it from one district to another for who is voting for. We're not moving any precincts.
But in
They stay
this
there.
case, if GO2 is largely elderly, African-American population, we would be moving into a very white upper class kind of district. And will they be happy with who's likely to be their council person, or would they rather vote for District 2 council person?
They won't be happy.
All right,
Let me just ask something about the schedule. So we start public comment next week. When is our next meeting scheduled for? And is it possible for us to meet early next week? Just to look at whatever minor changes we might ask for. And while y'all are looking, I will point out that proposal 2001, which would be our large one, there's no sense in putting that out to the public before we have massaged it, because it's not legal yet.
Right.
Yeah, and
201 modified is legal.
yeah,
Yeah.
take the 201, set that to the side. That was just the starting point, the way things used to be, and we're gonna walk down memory lane
Okay.
and make a pizza pie.
All right, your
It's better, but it's not really where it ought to be. But it's legal, but it's not where it ought to be for Greg.
Your last scheduled meeting is Tuesday, October the 12th, at which time we are expecting you to make a recommendation because the Greensboro Council will have a public hearing 1 week later on October 19th.
I'd suggest we need a meeting next week.
There's one next week
On
That's
Thursday.
a whole meeting. That's it.
You have the listening session at 7 o'clock.
Mhm.
Can
There's
we?
no reason we can't go longer than 8:30 after you've heard from people. Then you could have a work session, talk about what you heard and make changes to maps if you want to.
Personally, I'd rather meet on Monday or Tuesday. Or even Wednesday before that Thursday. If we ask for whatever tweaks we ask for tonight, whenever Dana can have them ready, if we could, look at them next week, that would be great.
I agree.
What is the will of the committee?
Now, are we talking about meeting before we put it out to public comment?
Yeah, one more time,
That would be done
preferably.
before, sorry, Marlene, that will be done before the meeting next week, so that the public will have time to review the maps. correct?
Yes, yes.
I'm going to suggest to you that whatever you decide tonight, something gets posted on the website tomorrow morning. So folks can start looking at what you're looking at.
Okay.
Technically, I believe there are 5 maps already posted.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're public record, they're out there.
yeah.
Although the 2001 modified is not out yet. But we would probably take down 2001 and put 2001 modified up with its statute.
So Marlene, I know that you're concerned about wanting to get the massaged map out. But from a public comment perspective, I mean, there's even things like making the point that the least number of changes is moving to legally comply. But that then gives, I mean, that actually creates potentially a problem with the GO2.
Yes.
And so I guess what I'm trying to get to, from a point of public comment, we can, in the way that we put these out, solicit more input and feedback, if that makes sense. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, we can make the point, this is the least number of changes. So if people are really concerned about least number of changes, we need to also be aware of the impact it's gonna have on that group. And so we can hear that, as opposed to putting out, here are 3 maps that we all would love to endorse today, and we want to know which of the 3 you love. Only to
That's not
have.
what I would suggest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I'm suggesting that we make the most efficient use of
right.
everybody's time, including the community, to put out the best maps we can for them to be looking at within this short time frame. If nobody can meet next week and we can't do it, we'll agree, I'll get over it. We can all still be friends. But, we're going to, if we put out maps that we know is gonna draw fire, we're just gonna have to spend a bunch of time putting out that fire.
Because
If
what
there's
I don't
if there are
want
quick
it to do,
fixes that we can make now, let's make that.
What I
Even if
don't
we
want-
have to put it in Dana's hands.
what I don't want it to do is discourage people from voting. Because it could. It really could. Well, we don't want that, no.
Well, let's just try this at least for now, because we don't need to spend a whole meeting talking about this part, but, can we just ask staff to, meantime, take a look at splitting G26 on Church Street and, moving GO2 back into District 2 and see if that is within the tolerances? We just don't know how many people live on either side of Church Street is the problem.
You're saying
Okay.
splitting 26 as a least change.
Yes.
Okay,
And moving GO2 back into District 2.
yeah.
All right.
I just wanted to say that I think it's important, and I agree with, the idea that when we're agreeing to move any district, we have to consider that the voters are still gonna vote. And that we might be displacing some people. But we also have to consider that that's probably gonna be something that happens regardless of what decision we make. we're gonna have to sacrifice something, or we're never, ever, ever gonna make a decision.
We have to change the current district. And, given that District 2 is destined for at least 2,500, 5,000 new residents, might take a look at moving G26 all the way into District 3, if that's satisfactory to those neighborhoods, but that's something we can look at later.
And that is in LC3.
Just to be clear, you can put out all 5 maps if you want to.
Let's do if we should, let's don't if it's just, if it's not worth it.
And there's a good chance that we could put out a 6th map, which would be your description of splitting 26.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious on 26, just to know, using Church Street, what the population is on either side.
Dana, will you know that in the next 15 minutes?
I will know that in the next few minutes, yes.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about the median maps then.
Median maps.
So I'm just gonna step out for a second and just ask you to think about how this needs, how we're getting public feedback. It's going on to the website tomorrow, or letting people know about the Zoom meeting next week. So via Zoom, you're gonna see these map choices. So we will, the marketing, the communications and marketing staff will hit the press release, social media, et cetera. Things will go out to council. But I'm just thinking through, do you think folks will patiently go through 6 maps and figure out the difference? And that's just food for thought. And I step back and sit over here.
As part of putting the information out, are we going to release, or maybe it's already out there, but release the shape file so that if people want to go crazy and do their own stuff, that they can?
They're public record,
Yeah.
so if they want to, all they have to do is ask for
Well, I mean, my question is, do we want to just post them out there so that people can go hog wild?
Dana, if you were going to do that, would you post the files or post a link to the files?
I think the link to the files. I think there shouldn't be an issue with that. It's just,
Yeah, Mac, what do you think about post the file versus the link to the file?
It's a lot of data to post.
Yeah, so when I ask, posting the shape file, I'm talking about just posting the shape file.
When you post a link, that means that the 15 people who want to dive in deep can do it easily.
Mhm.
So you're not burdening the site with a lot of data.
Oh, yeah, no, would not put the data in print, translated into HTML, because you're not gonna be able to understand the shape file unless you're a computer brain. But I think putting the shape file out there would be good, just so that, again, if there is someone who really, really wants to get into this, just make it as easy as possible, and maybe in that public comment period, we'll get some magic. But I mean, if folks are okay with that, I think we should do that if we're gonna ask public for comment.
All right, Dana and the staff will figure out some way to get that material accessible, whether it's posting material or posting links.
We'll also look through, I just had this, I had to send an image of Tasha making sure security of the file. So whatever, we will get an answer and get it accessibility and part.
And
In
to,
some form or fashion.
and to note, when that is posted, if there are things that council has said we don't want to use, just want to make sure that those are not included in the shape file. So for example, political party,
Can't do that. It's
or,
public record. If
Oh,
they want that
we
stuff,
don't
they
have
can
it.
get it.
yeah, but
We
they
don't have
it. We don't have
it in the
it.
shape file. Yeah,
It is public record, but it's public record on the Board of Elections website. We
Yeah.
now downloaded it and put it in these.
yeah, so if somebody wants
That
to,
works.
That was,
Mhm.
that would be a lot.
All right, so preliminary decision, are we looking to post 3 maps? 4 maps, 5 maps?
I think
6
so, but
maps?
I'd like to talk about the rest of the maps for a few. Let's go through those for just a minute.
Are we talking about medium maps?
Yeah, let's talk about the maps.
All right, then we're talking about C6 and C5.
So both of those do well. Again, sort of acknowledging that as Mac went through, they meet the criteria. In looking at the target deviation, C5 does a little bit better in growth for 5. Both of them do a good job for growth with 1 and 2. I will acknowledge, Mac made a comment when he was going through C5 that the G62 precinct going down, crossing 40, putting that in with 4 looked a little funny. To me, what looked funnier was how skinny 5 was getting down there. Not super skinny, but it's starting to look a little off.
Which map are you?
Oh, C5, yeah, C5, sorry. But again, C5 does a better job than B6 does with population growth.
Yeah, just barely, but when you consider growth, our negative number, our largest negative number probably ought to be in D5
Yeah.
and followed by D2.
I wish I knew more of the communities of interest. Laura, last week, one of my questions was, and I know they said we don't have the time. I said, in an ideal world, if we could, just as an exercise, if we could start from scratch, if we had like a map of the neighborhood associations and the map of the neighborhoods and overlay it with these current districts, just to see, how well do they adjust right now. And they said and I pointed out, I found out Hickory's got such a map. But I was thinking, at least in some of these areas, like you're talking about, down in the District 5 down here, or you're pointing out, Laura, would there be some way that we, like if we had another meeting or something that we could you give us some idea of neighborhoods in this G26 or, not maybe the whole city, but just these certain ones we're talking about? Because if Laura hadn't said what she said, I wouldn't have known that. Or like, what Ryan's talked about, these G56 and G50. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know, they might scream too. So I would just like a little more information on that, or less, like you say, we will let the public save the awesome time and see if the public points that out.
The public will do a lot of that. So who was in on this last go around 10 years ago? Is that the preponderance of the comments we got? None of them were.
10 years ago was the map that showed up on the porch.
Yeah, I know, but that's not what was adopted. But just from the public comment period, you remember, just my guess is that we're gonna get a whole lot of comment about, that's my neighborhood, and that's good or that's bad.
And that's what I want to hear.
But you won't know until you get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we did add one thing to help you with that. In the big map that you have in front of you, large format map, it has the name of the location where people live. So that will give you some indication of neighborhood or location in the city, some way to tie it to things that you know where are.
But I think you indicate that doesn't change where they vote.
No,
It only changes who they vote for.
Yes,
Right. Memorials went down.
It gives you the idea of the neighborhoods that you know, a lot of folks identify by their voting places.
Yeah, and the landmarks.
I have that split, if you wanted to see the change to the LC two, where we split G26, would you like to look at those numbers?
yeah, please.
All right. All right, so this would be the result of moving, on your LC2 map on the screen up front. Moving GO2 back into District 3, and then splitting G26 down Church Street. So that, the area that would be added to District 3 is 2,157, so you can see the numbers below. It might be hard to see down there, but District 1 would be 58,423, that didn't change at all. The only two that changed would be District 2, and that would go to 60,234. In District 3, District 3 would be 60,644. Yeah. So that doesn't change the numbers much, but it takes away moving GO2, and then it splits G26.
Okay, let me get this right. These people will still be going to the precincts where they have been going to vote, but they won't be voting for the same city council.
Correct.
I see some confusion in some people.
It
I
happens
see a lot of
every 10 years.
confusion in people.
They'll get a card from the Board of Elections that says, your precinct is now in this council district, but you're also gonna have a card that says, you're in this state senatorial district, you're in this state house district, because those are being redistricted too. This happens every 10 years, and we're in for a public education campaign to tell people what got moved and where.
Are they gonna know this? Are they gonna know? I mean, they should know, but I'm not gonna say they will know that they're gonna be voting for different candidates.
They will get a card from the Board of Elections.
Well, they won't know this when they choose this plan.
Well, but yeah, they know where they live, and they can see on the maps whether they've moved into a different council district or not.
And when candidates run, I think it'll be imperative on them to get out there and tell them who they
Yeah, see,
are.
that's what I'm saying. They
That's-
won't know
That's
when
a
we do this.
political responsibility,
Right.
that's not our.
They won't know at the time of this.
Well, at this point, there are multiple maps out, so nobody knows what the
Right.
final result will
Right.
be. But once council adopts them and sends them to the Board of Elections,
Mm.
they'll get notice from the Board of Elections. And my guess is that the city and the Board of Elections will do some public education campaign to tell people, here's the new district maps. You're also going to be getting that same kind of information about any changes in the state house and state senate maps and the congressional maps. So change is coming, and everybody's just going to have to commit to doing the best job possible to let people know that. But nobody will move where they actually go to vote unless the Board of Elections sometime changes the precincts. But they're not going to do that between now and the election. Way too late for that. So
We have no choice, it's got to change for a few people anyway, because our maps are not within the legal tolerances.
So if we're still good with a small, medium, large, can I put a question to the group on the small? Let's, if we can, maybe call it at least change 1.5, because it, or, well, it changes 1.5. But can we put to the group, so if we change 1.5, the half is going to create some sort of higher level difficulties and problems, but arguably does a better job of maintaining communities of interest. would the group be good with putting the small version of the 1.5 out there? Or a least change?
What are you saying, split, we have to split that district, we don't have church.
Correct. So that would be that half district, taking 26, splitting it down church. And then on LC2, where you see the G51, making that change. So making that G51 change and then just splitting G26 down Church Street.
And putting, G2 back.
Correct.
Well, that probably would look good for that particular map.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at LC.
It's LC3 you're talking
Yeah, we're
about.
talking
I'm
about.
talking about LC2.
It's 26 is not on LC.
No, it's LC.
It's LC3 and G26.
You know what? It's like.
I'm sorry, so I was trying to clarify the 1.5 change. So the 1.5 would be G51 moving into 4. G2 stays where it is in 2, but then splitting G26 down Church Street to make 1 precinct change and a half precinct change to get to the smallest, least changes possible map.
Well, I like what you're saying, but it's not on here.
It's,
No, we
yeah,
can
it is.
create,
Here.
we can create a new,
They're gonna create.
No,
Yeah,
it's
we
not.
created
we'll
it.
create a new map.
So here's what we'll do. That one will stay where it is.
Right, but it needs to say
This
it
one
right
goes
here.
back, yeah, and it will. But they won't have to run that map. And then
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
this will be through.
I just want to see it.
Yeah.
I just want to see it right here.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, like, to me, that seems like the absolute smallest change map we can make, and I feel like we should put that out to the public and say, look, we can move 1 district, divide it down Church Street. I think folks know whether they live to the east or the west of Church Street.
Right.
And that's like, that's the bare minimum.
Church Street is very big.
Yeah, it is major thoroughfare
I like that.
too.
I like that.
So are you all like dividing the community, dividing it by Church Street, or are you thinking it's?
We are.
So you don't think you're dividing the community?
No,
Okay.
Right, correct.
it's not a community.
Because Church Street is
Yeah.
a. huge
And there
area.
are, on either side of Church Street, there are, it's like smaller neighborhoods, sort of more like country neighborhood development, if that makes sense. So it's not anything giant.
No.
And I think that when we look at communities, Church, sort of on either side, it's very, very similar as you drive up, but I don't think that the far edges of that are dissimilar from the ones they're adjacent to. In other words, G26 west side is not terribly dissimilar to G25, G24, and then east side of G26 is not dissimilar from G09, for example.
What you're saying is we're splitting the precinct, but not necessarily splitting a community of interest.
Thank you, Matt, professional attorney working in this area. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and if you're wrong, I need to hear about it from the public.
Yeah.
Okay, Ellen, just,
I just wondered, this G51 that we talked about down here. Yeah, if Laura hadn't been here, we wouldn't know about GO2. Does anybody know anything about that G51? Is that part of the community?
It is part of Glenwood, and we would be splitting the Glenwood community.
Because that's, you just don't leave anybody out here, because it could be someone else more familiar would be going.
I would say Glenwood is an extraordinarily large neighborhood, and having done the neighborhood plan there, and it actually has 3 segments.
Okay, so how do you feel about G51 and G47? Are they?
Yeah, just does anybody have any knowledge of that area?
Oh, that's, okay, so,
Or can FR3 move
Yeah.
into? District
G47 is the heart of Glenwood, so that you would, and G51 is kind of blends into another neighborhood, so I think you're fine.
Oh, okay.
And if we're not, we'll hear
Like you
about
say,
it.
Yeah,
Hear about it.
Really, relatively speaking, but, but it's relatively speaking, that's, the majority of Glenwood is in the G47, that's the majority of the area.
And one of the things I'll be thinking about is whether there's a better something to pull away from the boundary of District 5 and District 4 that does fit better about community neighborhoods, but I don't feel like I need to make that decision before public comment.
And my other thought, when we post these, will we be helpful to say, just saying, if you live in G2, those of you, or, if you live in G51, take special notice, because people may not, they'll look at this and they don't know where they are. That's what.
I want to caution you
So I'm
not to
just
do that
asking.
when there's 6 maps out there and you're wanting everybody to go look at a map and say, something. You're inviting confusion that you don't need yet. And you're not recommending any of these map sets. The language we're going to ask you to use is, we are moving these forward for public comments. You're not recommending any of this yet. So sending people, trying to invite people to get concerned is premature at this point.
Okay.
Reasonable when you get to the public hearing in front of council and you're down to 1 or 2 maps. Now it's not as confusing, it's a real issue. At this stage, that's very confusing, and I wouldn't recommend it.
So Matt, when posting, are we okay to have something on there that, whether in summary of changes or just in the naming convention, ensuring that we say least number of changes? That was the goal of this map.
Well, we'll call it least change map.
Least change map.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Yeah,
All right.
sounds good.
So is everybody good with least change map and the 1.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
Do we,
Two
does
people have
anybody
announced
feel
that they-
compelled to also toss out LC3 and LC2?
Say this again.
Does anybody feel compelled to toss out the other?
To toss out.
Okay, now we're setting more of LC two. With the modification.
We're setting for LC 1.5, which is the modified LC2. Or do we also want to set forth LC2 and LC3?
I would think not.
No.
I think that the goal was to have the least change map. I think we've identified.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah,
We said no.
I'm good with
Yeah,
that.
I'm just making sure you're heard.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that the 1.5 version is the least change sort of work.
Has everyone nodded yes to that?
Alan?
Yes, I mean,
Yes.
now, when I'm not yes too, the proposed LC two as modified is what the least change, as the least change is identified, right?
Yes.
All right, so we got that one in place.
Yes.
All
All
right.
right. Hey, just so we can feel good about stuff, everyone's good with the most change. Actually, maybe this isn't
Let's
easy.
go to meetings.
Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, let's go meetings.
Don't bounce me around. I've been around in neuropsych exams all day. And I failed them all.
Great things to share with the public, Marlene.
Yeah, I know, it's okay, have a.
So I assume that the median change map, you're talking about either C5 or B6, correct?
Yes. Right, okay.
So we're gonna try to identify one of those to move forward.
Yeah, and the problems we've already, potential problems we've already identified is D5 needs to be the district with negative target, the biggest negative target deviation. And it's not in either one of these versions, but also G58 and G62 and G56 are precincts on both of these maps that are below 40, that drive District 4 below Interstate 40, which is less than ideal.
Between C5 and B6 to put out a median, I lean on C5 because it goes the least amount south of 40 with that spillover. But I think also, even though it doesn't do the best job of addressing D5, it does, C5 does a better job than B6 in addressing C5. In addressing District 5. precise. And I recognize it's 0.19% deviation versus 1.57.
And I do have a question, I'm sorry, I do have a question. Did we still include that split district?
These
Or,
are
because
not-
that's what I'm saying, because in both
Yeah.
of these, 26 is moved.
Yeah, I
Do
don't,
we want to
But
split
the whole
that
point
district
of
and all these
splitting
maps?
26 was we wanted to be very specific about keeping these communities together, right?
so 26 was to split 26 in lieu of
Right.
taking GO2.
Right, right. But we're still gonna face the same problem. Are we on 26?
G26 is the Church Street extension, it runs
Okay,
way out.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, and I'd actually, I kind of like the idea of saying, hey, here's where we went a little rogue with least changes
Right.
to split, it creates this headache for some, okay. And then not necessarily pulling that forward in the others that we put out.
I'll give you the arguments for splitting 26. Normally, if you do that, it confuses three folks. People that live in the district, people that live in the precinct, candidates, and the Board of Elections. Using something as big as Church Street, it's going to be less confusing to all three of those, and it's especially easier for the Board of Elections. What they will have to do is geocode every address in that precinct to go one way or the other. But if your split line is Church Street, that's a whole lot easier than meandering through a neighborhood and picking a creek or something.
Right.
This is not going to be that difficult for the Board of Elections. They will not come looking for it wherever it is.
Okay.
What is that big, unincorporated hole in the middle of G26?
Well, Marlene, it's immediately adjacent to a Wells Fargo bank. And I knew this because of, last weekend or weekend before last, I had a geo-encoded map of the current precincts and I drove all around town for
You're such a
an
nerd.
hour. I know, I am a nerd, for about an hour and 45 minutes. My wife thought I was crazy, but she let me. So I was very curious about that as well. I went into it and I looked, and there's a street that you go and it goes immediately from city to, it is a private, it's got a country feel to it. The homes have been there for a very long time. It looks like in the back corner, there's a very large farm.
Okay.
I saw there was a barn that had some very, very old equipment that looked like it had not been used in a long time, with access going down the hill to what looked like a very large farm.
Okay.
Funnily enough, when you turn around on that street and head back, there is you're now entering Greensboro sign. So it definitely, so I confirmed for me, yes, I did leave the city by driving down this little street right there.
I think
So that's
Ryan,
an
you're getting
old-
a star. I think
Okay,
you're getting
thank
a
you.
star.
Thank you. Apologies to the other bank that's on the other side of the Wells Fargo. I can't remember, but there's another bank there.
All right, so that's an old, well-set.
Yes,
lot
yes.
split off. It'll probably eventually be redeveloped.
Yeah.
But okay, that answers that.
So.
Okay, so the question is, do we split that precinct for all these maps, or do we just wait and hear what people have to say about splitting that precinct?
I think we just wait here
Okay,
because
let's wait and hear.
the benefit was in the least change.
Yeah, okay, I'm good with that.
So we're thinking C5 then?
I mean, what are other folks think?
I think 5 is the better of the two and comparing it to B6. And part of that is the target deviation numbers are better. And the crossing 40 is better. Keep that precinct on that other side of 40. I think everything considered of the two is the better option to present to the public.
I agree. I think we need to move G62 back into District 5 and take something from this northeast boundary of District 5 into District 4 instead.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm not sure everybody's following here where the suggestions are. So.
And pick something else.
So
It's a district five. So on
So
the-
Marlene, if you look, I don't want to get to the side conversation,
I was
sorry.
gonna say, I'm trying to get everybody up on the same map, and I'm looking up on the screen to see if maybe that would be helpful for folks.
Yes.
So here's what we'd be doing. You put this, do you see? Put this back up here. No, I'm sorry,
Back
this
down
stays
there.
down here. And then we have to find something else along this boundary to
Yeah.
move over here.
Yeah.
So, Dana, what's the population of G 62?
2574.
And you can stand to take a lot out of it because District 5 can go way negative. We can take another 4% out of District 5 before we.
Does that mean you're thinking
Get out.
So
41B?
Dana, can you put the map back up? All right, so Dana, we need to find something else along this green boundary that's in the neighborhood of 25 to 3,200 population.
Yeah, and 41B is listed at 2812. The FR3 is only 2118.
The sound of crickets again is a sign of luck and not the silence in the room.
And it's actually a real cricket.
It is not an editorial comment.
Well, the challenge here is that all of those neighborhoods are kind of, well, they're kind of homogeneous, but they're all very, the same characteristics as the rest of District 4, so.
Well, you could take 41B, could take 41A. Move it over into 4.
You can't take 41A because that would break continuity in the middle of the district.
Ooh.
That's true.
Well,
Wait, does 41A go around? Uh-oh.
Okay.
41A is up here and through here, but if you take it out, you've broken between here. and
Yeah,
here.
but Mac, I think 41B, if it's in blue, it's funny looking. It goes beyond,
It goes north of
is that
20.
right? Yeah, which means that would create a break.
It's got like a little top to it.
Yeah.
So-
Looks like a Great Lake hole.
Is this
hanging out.
the top of 41B?
Yeah, looks like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then taking 41B creates a break too.
Is that Brian Boulevard? That-
Yeah, it looks like it
Yeah.
goes on both sides of Brian.
And that would
Is that
break
the way?
it.
Yes.
So, don't anybody shoot me, I'm just throwing this out for thought, we can move, district, we can move almost everything from District 5 east of the airport into District 4 without getting out of tolerance. Certainly, well, yeah, you want to do that, so, yeah.
But then I'm just wondering, as far as like the type of population that lives in that area, we're just adding more of the same into it, as opposed to ensuring some type of diversity within District 5, or some type of diversity within District 4. I mean, if we're thinking moving everything east of the airport into 4, right?
For food for thought.
We don't, that's
Just
too
for
many.
discussion, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of what the pie map starts to do, but yeah.
Yeah, those are huge numbers.
Yeah,
I will suggest,
But 1 percentage point is about 6,000 people, is that?
She's,
Okay.
Dana's trying to.
G63 is 2,721, so that's between the range that we're looking at. Or instead of moving this, we could move that.
We're
No,
trying to
we're
get
trying to-
something from District 5 into District 4.
You put this one back into 5 and move, did I get that right, Dan?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Put it back in the file.
This goes back into 5, this goes,
Oh,
But that is already part of 4.
that's fairly innocuous.
does that work?
No.
That's already in there, isn't it?
Just
Oh, is that already in
No,
there?
that's-
Three is already in
That
there.
goes to 5.
Yeah.
That would go to I, right?
G62 is already in 5.
Poor Daniel, what did you just recommend and we were just confused?
It's already in 4.
And I kind of hate to say this, but you could just take that section of G64 that's between Market and 40 and the outer loop and add it, you know, but it's right beside G63, you could just make all that District 4, all the way out to 73. Is that, y'all see that? It would be split in precinct, yeah.
You mean
But-
G64, the whole section? All the way up, that goes all the way to.
Say that again?
No, not the whole, G64 goes all the way around to the other side.
And where are you talking about putting?
I'm talking about taking the part of G64 that is immediately west of G63 and would be bounded by Market Street on the north, 73, the outer loop on the west, and Interstate 40 on the south.
All the way up to 68?
Splitting the district is 73 then.
Splitting the district of G64.
Splitting the precinct.
Precinct.
Splitting
Precinct.
its precinct, thank you.
So,
Yeah,
As I'm looking at it,
Yeah.
that might break continuity too.
yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to.
so
figure
if you stayed north of 40, you'd keep a sliver, but what we don't know is out of that 4,583 in all of 64, how many are in that little area there?
That's right.
So I'm gonna pull us back to the question, if we're looking for the medium change, it's medium change, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are we, is the pursuit of perfection undermining the good?
Maybe.
Well said.
yeah. Good point, but I'm really bothered by taking District 4 below 40.
Well,
If it were any, you know,
Just asking, since you're not making the final decision, and I just see how much pain we're going through, I just throw that out there to think.
And Marlene, I think it has been adequately stated for the public record in this recorded documentation.
let's see what they
but I
got.
don't like
That
that.
you don't like that.
See what they have to say about it.
But yeah, noting that we're now 30 minutes past our schedule.
Okay, let me propose a fix.
You must know.
Put G62 back in 5 and put G42B in District 4. It's not an even population swap, but it's good enough for now.
So how does that affect these other numbers?
All right, Dana, the population in 62.
District 4 would go down by 1,000.
It's about 1,400 person difference.
The District 4 would go down by 1,400, District 5 would go back up by
All right, so
1,400.
now,
But we
okay,
can polish that later.
okay, I mean, no big deal for me. Let me see what that number is over here.
So I was wondering, if we're looking at populations, if we were to include FR3 into 4 and not do anything about 62, we would continue, we would keep continuity, wouldn't we?
No, I don't think so.
Because we wouldn't-
Notice that the very tip of FR4 splits between FR5A and FR3. So 5A isn't touching 3.
You start
I'm
getting
looking
continuity
at
problems.
There is a question about this. I'm going to admit to you that there is an unknown here, and that is, you'll notice that there are pieces of the rest of this that go up that way. And there's contiguity if you look at the entire precinct of FR5A, but no piece of the city limit line goes all the way up and matches. So there's some question about whether that maintains contiguity.
And that section on Pleasant Ridge Road that is a break in city limits, right?
I don't know where Pleasant Ridge.
Sorry, apologies. In FR 5B, immediately south of FR 5B, you see the label Pleasant Ridge Road.
Yes, yes.
I'm assuming that we don't have a really, really narrow precinct area that's covered up by that thicker blue line that would make a skinny connection. Look, I'm just reaching.
I don't think so.
Okay, I just wanted to ask. So,
I'm amused by your characterization, that's all. Not
Thank
the
you.
suggestion itself.
thank you, I appreciate that. All right, Marlene, I know you don't like 62, where it is.
And I'll trade it for G 4150. And shut my mouth.
So 41B though breaks unless we know that north of Bryan Boulevard,
I'm
there
sorry.
are no people living in 41B.
Not 41, well, 42.
42?
42, yeah. That's the one that works.
But that's a little bit too short as far as the number
Yeah.
of people.
It's
And we
still within tolerances though.
But I have one question. though.
Yes.
If we're putting this one here and these two connect, doesn't that maintain it? If we're putting this one here?
She's saying move FR3, is the very northeast corner of District 5. Move that into 4. And the
I'm
question
gonna
is,
keep it there.
do you still have contiguity with the city limit? And the question is, I'm not sure. Because if you move that, there's no connection between the things below FR3.
Isn't that connected right there? I mean, it's-
That connects, she's looking at this very small little piece in the top of FR4 to the right that sticks out. That would still be there as a connection for FR4, but it's not a connection directly to other parts of the city limits.
But that's FR4 there.
Yeah, see, it's the difference between, is contiguity determined by precinct or by city limit line?
And we're determining by city limit lines.
And there is, what I'm saying to you is, there is no case law that I can tell you answers that question.
So we can go either way then.
Okay, that's one way to look at it.
Oh, you just upset the
James,
attorney.
thoughts?
I'm just thinking, if there's nothing permanent,
Technically.
why couldn't we go either way?
From my vantage point, if we're gonna have the public comment on something, I think the committee ought to be sure that it's going to be a legal version, that meets all the criteria. So again, to have the public comment and, put it out there and say, okay, yeah, we like this, and then come back a couple weeks later, or even somebody challenges it and we lose the lawsuit, that would be detrimental to the whole process. So I just think that there's no reason to put a risky map up for public debate. If that's the only way we can address something, that's something we consider recommended council. But I think the map that you put for the public ought to be squarely within the criteria that are the minimum that we need to be constitutional.
So for those of you who might not be sure where this gap is, I'm going to move from FR3 into 4. And the question is the fact that this little piece of FR4 is still in the city, and this piece of FR4 is in the city, therefore connecting up over here. Does that do it? This is the gap that concerns James and me. A city limit line connection between these pieces.
Okay, then I have,
Precinct line connection, but not a city limit line.
then I have a question. Is that section that's not incorporated yet, is that because it's part of the airport territory agreement, or is it because it's just not been developed and annexed yet?
I don't know off the top of my head, it's highly possible it's airport property.
It sure looks like it's in,
Yeah.
Norris County.
Yeah, but if it's airport property, there's a long-standing agreement that the airport will not be annexed into Greensboro or any other city.
And they won't be
So
building
it's hard to
a
tell
conventional
why without looking at
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
yeah, it's possible, probable, so,
yeah.
so I go back to how close are you on your mediums? Because I know it's, I mean, again, great conversation and great ideas. And the question becomes, are we closer to thinking what that medium map is gonna be? Or,
Y'all are having, by the way, the exact debate that we all had trying to put this together, which is in District 5, you've got a relatively large landmass precincts trying to move. It's very difficult to do, and that's how you ended up, how we ended up moving G 62. Yeah, so I will admit, it's simply because it was the right size.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, y'all heard me last week, I'm bothered by District 4 being landlocked and would like to continue to fiddle over the course of this process with that area right there. I don't feel compelled to fix it tonight. I only feel compelled to fix, what's my, G 62. And frankly, if that's all we move tonight, and know if we end up with this medium map, we'll probably, you know, fiddle some more with it because of the boundaries, I mean, just because of the population in the district, then personally, I'm okay with that.
Right, Dana, if you put all of G 62 back into 4, what's the total pop in 4 at that point? And what I really want to know is what's the variance? I think it's going to bump over 5.
Go up by about 2,600 people.
No, that would be.
You put it
taking
from
it
5
out
to 4, as opposed to
in
4 to 5.
C5.
We're
In this plan, it would be taken out of
going to put that
4
one back
and leaving it
in
in
5.
5.
Where it is now.
Yeah, so that's gonna reduce your deviation at 4 down, which would be okay.
Yeah.
But you're gonna get your 5 up.
It's gonna bump the 5 up.
And
That's
that's
still
why,
legal, and it's something, and we can, and you know, polish those numbers later.
the reason why I recommended FR3, and I know that there's this little issue. But we can figure out whether it's an issue, whether it's gonna be an issue. If it's part of the airport, then it's not nearly as much of an issue as we thought it was gonna be. Because the numbers, and it gives us a longer term with the deviation.
Yeah.
Who can answer the airport questions? Is that?
It's not an airport question, it's an election law question. It's whether or not having a connection from one piece of the city limit to another piece of the city limit meets the contiguity requirement.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not an airport question.
Yeah.
It's an airport question only in the sense that you can't go annex it to fix this problem.
Exactly.
no matter how hard I try, you can't.
Okay.
It's like 10 feet wide running down.
Let me give you a suggestion for how to get out of this bind. We hear you that you would like to put 62 back into 4 and figure out something else to do with 5. My suggestion is you move forward with if C5 is your favorite between D6 and C5. Move forward with C5 and your staff and I and the DJ will try to figure out some other options for you by the time we meet again for the listening session.
I'm okay with that.
Will the map that we put out for public comment have D62 back in District 5?
It can. We're gonna leave it where it is. But if you want us to, we'll put a note that says the committee is concerned about dropping G62 out of 4 and into 5.
I thought you
Vice
said you
versa.
didn't want to do that, that would be putting something else.
Well, if y'all are, if you're telling us they're gonna look at a way to fix that, so we can be honest about the fact that you told us to go look for a way to fix that.
Well, why use C5? The primary reason you were using C5 is because it gave more growth in District 5. You're gonna put 62 back in 5, then you might as well go with proposal D6.
pull some right over. Yeah, Mac, I like your sort of compromise there, putting out C5 with a note that we're not terribly keen on 62, but the math is hard. Or put more eloquently than that, Matt.
You can look at B6 and see what we moved and see how difficult it is to find the right population to make a move.
Yeah, and B6, I mean, B6, if Marlene's big concern is crossing 40 like that, I mean, B6 is worse
Right.
to her concern.
That's right.
And I have to agree, that's my neighborhood.
All right.
The neighbors.
I don't have with a note.
All right, so it's,
And I guess to help alleviate your news, so it's one thing to say, no, that this is under consideration. It's another note to say, hey, pay attention to this, just so you know there's a change here. One's directional, one's informational. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can live with that. I can't imagine a scenario in which I'm ever gonna be happy with having one precinct on the other side of 40 in the district. So I'm also happy with changing it now and, putting a note that says we're still gonna have to fiddle with the population of District 5.
Yeah, Marlene,
But that's all I'm saying, it's like, we can still be friends.
if we're gonna fiddle with it, we need to give staff the opportunity to have that time. And I think if we are going to fiddle, we may need to get creative like we did earlier in order to maintain lines
Yeah, I can.
and keep precincts connected.
all right, I need to see 5 people nod that you're okay with C5 with a note that says committee has directed staff to see if there is a way to put 62 back in 4 and there's something else out of time.
Yeah, well, yes.
Yes, did you really want to?
I did.
Is there anybody who thinks that they will ever vote for leaving 62 down there?
I'm
In
sorry,
district? Is there anybody who thinks you think that G62 is gonna stay in District
So
4?
Marlene, I don't know,
Yeah.
but like, we
Okay, if
need
y'all
that,
can
the math has
decide,
to
let's
work.
go to the
Yeah,
next.
let's not direct at this point.
Yeah.
I will say,
I see the difference.
Marlene, I will say, this is the neighborhood that I live in, and it would be a less difficult transition to have G62 in District 4 than have G58 and G56 in District 4.
All right,
Okay,
so is B6 no longer on your list for consideration?
correct,
Correct.
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 All right, you're making progress.
You got 3 minutes?
All right, at this point, we have two maps
Well, this is the last one.
with a suggestion that we also put out 2001 model. By the way, we're going to change the wording of this from proposal to draft. Proposal again, we just go over.
Right.
Moving
And for the name, should it be named 2001? I mean, is that the best shorthand for the community, or is it,
we're gonna like
I agree, that would confuse
Yes.
a lot of people.
and recognize that, pizza pie is probably too colloquial, but,
historic.
I mean, Matt, what is this called in the profession? I mean, is it called pizza slicing or
Usually pie.
pie slice?
I'm
Okay.
saying we just call it pie. There's
Let's
not
call it pie.
different from the old districts for us to really recognize.
Yeah.
Let's just call it
Let's call it the pie.
the pie.
People are familiar with pie charts.
Yeah.
So we're gonna call it pie shape. Draft map.
What about the historical pie shape?
Yeah, let's get rid of that one.
All right, so
It's not local.
2001 win. 2001 modified, renamed pie shape draft map is under consideration. Y'all want to ask any questions about it?
I mean, its deviations are not the best for what we're trying to get to. but it does achieve some pie.
It has the same issue with 5 that almost every other map we look at has. It doesn't deeply cut the population of 5.
Well,
With this
district,
shape, we've got some more options for how to look at doing it.
I would point out though that all of a sudden, all that growth is not happening in District 5.
No,
All
it's
that
not.
growth is happening
It's now spread.
is, yeah, it's now split between 4 and 5 and 2, which is probably better.
Yeah. I'm okay with this as the pie to put out, and we can think about it and hear public comment. But I mean, I think this is a good, because people are gonna wanna know, what about that old pie? I mean, there's 21 precinct changes, I mean, that's, I think this is a pretty good, like, large change model, and if there are little things on this that we can adjust, I think we can address.
I like it for that reason. It's a good balance for that least change, conservative thing we're showing. I like that. I hope that the public will give us some clear idea of what they like.
Is when we put the map out, where it says summary of changes, is it still gonna say what it's saying now?
No, we'll go through and pull out all the data to show those changes, including the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, this was done on the fly.
Ready for the meeting.
Yes.
You're good.
So I got 5 yes nods to the pie-shaped draft map.
Let me ask,
Not yet, okay?
yeah, well, I just have a question for the group. So aside from all those precincts getting close to the airport, moving out of 5, that whole airport area going into 4, the precincts that are going to experience the most change are G26. We've already talked about what we might do with that if we run into problems with the neighborhoods. G11. Is G11 going to be okay with going from District 3 to District 2? And do we need to worry about that tonight?
That's interesting.
And then, while you're chewing on that, the next group experiencing a lot of change in that map is G 50, 48, 49, and 63. And then,
Hold on, where are those, Marlene? Okay, hold on, got you. You said,
yeah, just above the Interstate 40 shield.
oh, I see.
They'll be going into District 5.
Yeah.
Out of District 4 and into District 5.
This is a great visual representation of the problem that we have with population. Look at District 5 on this map and how very compact it is, yet it has substantial population. That's what makes this difficult. If all precincts were equal in size, you wouldn't need me or the planning commission.
So, okay, this is interesting. So basically, Sunset Hills and Woodley Park and Starmount Forest all go back to be in District 4 like they were 1,000 years ago.
You know, another thing this does is that it splits everything right down Church Street.
Except G26.
Except
Yeah.
I'm good.
although population wise and diversity wise, we already talked about G26 not being that diverse on either side, right? But everything else, it kind of does it right down the middle.
Half the people in G26, Church Street, they don't even know what district they're in. If you want to know the truth, they don't. They don't know what's 2 or 3.
Well,
Long term, I would recommend that unless you have to split a precinct,
Mhm.
don't. This city is large enough to do it without splitting precincts. If you live in Lucama, you're gonna have to split precincts to make it work, but not here.
Yeah.
So that's a last resort.
I used to live in those precincts, 45, 48, 49, 63, 50. And my guess is, for the most part, those neighborhoods would be found in District 4. They used to be in District 4. Now, I probably jinxed it, but.
And frankly, I would say if this is something that y'all put together, sort of at the suggestion request of make a pie, I'd say let's go ahead and put it out, because I would prefer to go ahead and put it out and hear from the folks in those areas rather than speculate.
Right, yeah, I agree. And I just said it wrong. They've always been in District 4 and we're moving them into District 5. But District 5 is changing so much.
It's changed, yeah, it's different.
So I will say, if you look at the pie map, so many of the district divisions are ideal as far as major thoroughfares dividing the pie.
Yeah.
And any way you put it, our neighborhood populations typically are divided by major thoroughbreds. Yes, exactly, thoroughbreds, everybody, that's what they're divided by.
From Somerville.
Yeah.
That if I look at this map, what it says to me as a person who does redistricting work is that the folks who put this together wanted every district to come into the center city. So the changes that we made between the 2001 straight map and the 2001 modified map were out around the edges, not in the middle. And if you're going to retain the theory of this map, which is that all districts have some skin in the game in the middle of the city, you really have to make your changes out around the edges. So in the intervening week, as y'all play with it, remember that the theory of this map, if you want to retain it, is every district lands somewhere close to the middle of the city.
I also think it diversifies everything a little bit as far as populations. Some more than others, but I think there's more diversity throughout with this pie as opposed to the other.
Yes and no. All right.
Yeah.
Each of you has in front of you a color-coded map that shows the percentage of non-white population by census tract, not precincts, census tracts. And you'll notice where the high percentage of non-white population is. This pie-shaped graph map retains those minority-majority districts in 1 and 2, because it still has them, even though they get closer to the center city. You'll notice that the non-Hispanic Black population on that pie-shaped graph map is still at 65 and 66%. So it maintains what were traditionally the majority minority districts.
Wow.
Here's the good news and bad news about this, just to put it in plain English. Greensboro has a segregated historical housing pattern, which makes it very easy to draw districts that match up with communities of interest where that is based on either race, ethnicity, or income. And here's the proof.
Well, that's not a surprise.
Well documented.
I know you're not supposed
Yeah.
to. All right, is there general consensus? I have 5 nods around the room that the pie-shaped graph map moves forward for public comment.
Yes.
6 nods.
Yes.
6 nods, I'm sorry. I can't count. 6 nods.
I was gonna say, is there a lot of lots of people down?
I'm so used to saying 5 districts. So I did, yeah. Okay. 6 nods. All right. You ready to move on to the next quick topic? Is that a hand up or you just rest?
Well, the only thing that I don't see that we talked about last time is the boundaries of the city's expansion possibilities.
Aye.
Is
Okay.
that,
Um,
I'm fine with looking at that next time.
Some people that along, so we have a map that shows the. And it goes down and water.
The boundaries of other cities, yeah. Right, because right now for growth, we have the approved subdivisions and projects, but we don't have all the other land that we could expand into because it's
We did
not in
that.
Summerfield territory
Yeah.
and all that.
We'll email you a link to it.
Okay,
We did it, sorry, it's just in the bundles, it didn't come down.
okay.
Here's the risk. Let's just be clear. There's census data. There's city projections of growth based on approved plats for development of single-family and multifamily units. And then there's annexation of typically vacant land. So if you get all the way out here, you're absolutely guessing about what those numbers are. We must use the census population. We are providing you with this lots approved because that's likely to be developed. Caution you too much about putting too much stock in trying to guess how many people are going to be in annexed areas that don't have approved development plans yet.
Except for that, we do this for a living. So,
Yeah.
but the other thing is, how much of that would actually happen in 2 years?
Well,
So
we
it's
don't
worth it.
project what density at this point.
Yeah.
So we know where we want to go, but we don't have the density yet, so.
All right.
For general information, great, for final decision making, not so much. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Mac, you said.
Okay, so we've done number 3 on the agenda, which is selection of draft maps to put forward for public comment. Community involvement, engagement, participation, update, Russ.
Yes, and I can be brief. So we've had our webpage available since our last meeting. And we've had the email address open. We have not received any emails to this point.
NA's press release went out announcing it, so.
Correct. So we had a press release that went out announcing this meeting, announcing the fact that the webpage was live. We will have another press release that goes out Monday, letting people know about the next meeting. Again, emphasizing the webpage is out there. We can have some language about the maps that have been added. The current maps have been posted just for a day or so. So hopefully we'll get some more traction as we, have some more things for people to review. But the webpage does have the presentation from last week and the video, link to the video recording. So we can have access to that as well.
Russ, can we get the next press release to be given to the committee members?
Sure.
So they can share with
Absolutely.
their friends and family?
That's what I wanted to ask, is like with the League of Women Voters, our fair elections, our Facebook, and I mean, we go out to thousands of, alerts. That would just be a lot right
So we would
there.
get the press release out to y'all and then share as you will.
Yeah,
That would be great, because you see something in the paper, it's one thing, but I see something from Ellen, I'm like, oh, Ellen thinks this is important, and I pay a little more attention to it.
and not everybody gets the paper, they just don't. Online. I mean, we had to learn that from the lead stuff, we just have to, as you can probably, everybody has to reach the people in other ways.
Okay, Matt, what else?
All right, any other questions?
And one tiny one, just remind me, does the census growth projections also project by demographic group or just total population?
We can't base it on projections, but we can base it on count. And the count does come with demographics, yes.
But do their projections, do they project by demographics too?
The census doesn't provide projection.
Yeah, the state data center does, but I don't think they've even thought to put those out yet at this point.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions about maps? Any other questions about the process? Any other questions about the next meeting?
Where are we meeting and what is the public comment process?
We're meeting here,
Okay.
and the IT folks will have it set up so that.
No pressure, people.
So that mainly we'll be listening for the first part of the meeting, but I think I hear y'all saying that after the public has commented, you want to have another conversation to digest what they've said and maybe make some changes to maps that you've got in front of you. And some folks might have actually propose a full-scale map pro forte. So are y'all willing to not set a specific end time for the next meeting, and let's just see how it organically goes?
You know, the history is 2 years back.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Do we want to, I guess we really can't, but do we want to suggest that somebody's giving us a map to give it to us by that meeting?
What do you think about?
I mean, I know they can give it to us right up until the council here.
Yeah. My suggestion is that the people who are interested in doing that are drawing from that. I've got a lot of experience in this area. There is a small but committed group of people out there who are doing what Ryan did, which is pouring over the map, pouring over the statistics.
Matt, you are mocking the level of seriousness in which I have applied to this.
You're doing great, you're doing great. But there are some more people out there doing that. You don't have to invite them. They're out there doing it.
Yes.
And just for those of them who are actually watching, we know who you are.
In your experience, do they usually submit it to the committee or do they wait and run the council?
No, when you put a process out, folks who really want their map seriously considered will put it in.
Okay.
Although I will tell you that most of the time, the committee that's established to do this work in every other city in the country is a committee of council members. It's not a committee of citizens. This is very, very unique.
Welcome to Quakerville.
All right, I have one more question. Dana, Russ, and Sue, when do you think these will be changed, new labels on, corrected data, and on the website and ready to send out in links? What time tomorrow will they be ready? We can make my
What's the
question.
time she gets home tonight?
I would say definitely by 4 o'clock,
Okay.
hopefully earlier.
Okay. All right.
You sure that's enough time? I'm just being protective. Is enough time
There's
for
3 maps.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Good news.
And we'll look at posting whatever other links or data people will need to play with. All right. Any other business for the good of the order this evening? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a quick one. The question about, when we send out emails or whatever, what is public information? If friends email me, Ellen, how did the meeting go? What do you think? And I answer Andy. Is that part of a public record?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Quick review.
what if it's a phone call, somebody calls me?
It's the public record law, not the public thought law.
Okay.
So if there is a record created as part of the business of this committee, whether it's on your personal computer, your business computer, or somebody actually sends you a note or sends you a map, that's a public record because it's part of the deliberations of this committee.
But if I'm walking the
Say-
dog in the neighborhood and,
And they tell you something? No,
that's good, okay.
that's not a public record. All right, are we good to go this evening? Thank you all for your intent of really focusing on this. This is hard work. For people who don't do this a lot, this is hard work. Thank you for paying attention and being ready to